So I had a plan. It was a tiny home plan. It was the perfect, at least I thought it was the perfect plan. And it sounded great. And then I ran the numbers. And the numbers killed it. So I've decided to pivot. Listen, I'm going to talk about what was in my original plan, what the performer actually showed me once I finished it, and then what I'm going to do instead of just building something that looks good, but fails financially, because it's not what I'm trying to do. And that's definitely not what's going to happen here. So if you're new here, my name is Oliver Perry. I am a 20-year U.S. Army soldier, about to retire, and I am a future real estate developer. And right now, my first project I'm working on now is building a tiny home. So the original plan was focused on historically black colleges, right? It was supposed to be laid out specifically for students of those colleges. Historically black colleges in the last few years have become a very popular and has attendance has picked up. So my idea was to provide facilities for these universities. The idea that you can come and not just have to live on campus, you can live off campus, but you have a own space of your own, 300 to 400 square feet. Boom, you got a bedroom, you got the bathroom, you got a little kitchen, you might have a roommate, but it is nice that you have that time to be in that property and learn things. So the idea was, while they're there, I also have to have a recreational facility. In that recreational facility, my intent was to have classes on property management, handling your property when you buy a property, the process of buying a property, financial literacy, learning how to save and when to spend, when not to spend, things of that nature, as well as learning about the stock exchange and learning about estate management. So learning how to take the money and really build that generational wealth that we all talk about consistently, right? This was the idea for this particular project. I felt like it was great for the community. I definitely thought it would be great for these students, and I thought it would be great for me as well. I get my first project. I may not make a boatload. I might have to partner with a few people, but I can get that experience under my belt and move on to the next thing. So I sat down and I did the pro forma to do this. I looked at conservative numbers. Conservative numbers are when you go through everything as if it's worst case scenario for you and best case scenario as far as worst case scenario as far as expenses. So let's say the cost of something is somewhere between $7 and $8. You choose the $8 because it's more expensive. That's how I went through this pro forma. And it showed quick that I was not going to pull this off the way that I thought I would. The biggest thing that I realized as I was going through the numbers is the cost of getting the properties was already far over the cost of, not the cost, but the profit that I would get from students or from partnering with the college. So the properties costed $89,000 a piece. Students are only paying $700 to $900 in rent per month based on that school's lodging right now, their student lodging, their student housing, that is. Their student housing had that $700 to $900, depending and varying, of course, based on what model they're in. So even if I looked at it at $900 for the students paying, with me spending $89,000 on the property, and I'm looking to do 4 different properties, 2 2-bed 1-baths, 2 1-bed 1-bath, and it just would not work. The numbers just don't work. And you could sit down and do the calculations yourself and see, but it would not work. Even if those students paid every month on time, between now and the end of the year, that year, I would have been so far in the hole just with the 4 properties, it wouldn't have made sense. Not, mind you, I didn't even touch at all, not a second. I had not touched yet any expenses as far as slab, taxes, land clearing, the cost of land itself, any surprise, reserves, things of that nature. None of that was covered in there. So let's talk about these exact three things that the numbers actually expose. The margins won't work. The margins being that space between the profit and the expenses. We just talked about that. There's no way it worked. I need more cushion to execute it. I know it's not going to be perfect, but I don't want it to be so fragile that one thing would shatter the entire plan or shatter the entire dream. And in this particular case, just starting would have shattered the entire plan. The second thing, I realized that the risk was higher than I wanted to admit when the plan was in my head. Knowing spending that $89,000 to get the properties there, the students only, let's say, again, spending $700 to rent. With the expenses of things like the reserve not being there, that means none of the maintenance happen. I'd have to also assume management of the property myself to cut costs. I didn't want to do that. I want to build the property. I want to create this thing. I'll be honest, I don't want to manage it. I'm going to have to find somebody else to do that. So that's another 8% of profit goes to them. That's not going to work. And now, again, we're not talking, there's no surprises here. There's no delays aren't included in this. And when building, I learned this when I flipped a property. Time is money. Everything costs the slower you move. So I have to have what's called holding costs when it comes to this property. I have to continue to pay the taxes. I have to continue to pay a mortgage on the property if I have a mortgage on the property. All these things have to happen no matter what. So I don't think that would have worked. Next, and this is the third one, and really final out of the three. The operations would have been too big to handle without having that cushion. We're talking building that recreational center is what kind of really drove this. Building a recreational center would have made things more difficult because now I have to add that in there, and I had not thought about what it would cost as far as maintenance to that particular property, what it would cost as far as utilities for that particular property as well. Not to mention I have to still provide internet for the students and all that. And it wasn't just built, this wasn't just built for students to just be in for a period of time. It was built to allow them to be there, to learn lessons, to really enjoy their stay. So it needed to be able to handle the event, the parties. They're college students, they're gonna party, they're gonna hang out, they're gonna have a good time. It meant to do that. It was meant to be able to house them having friends come over, being able to cook out, things of that nature on a smaller scale at their particular unit. And I didn't even look at the contractor's timeline and the systems that would go into it when it came to the operation side. And that is another part that ended up killing it. So here's the pivot. The pivot is we're going to go away from the college model. This is not to say we won't come back to it. It's just to say right now, with this being the first time in the shoot, the smarter move, in my opinion, is to deal with a model that we're more familiar with, at least on the single family side, that I understand how to deal with some of the problems that come with it, just in a tinier format. So we're going to regular rentals. So now the idea is to rent to whoever decides they want to rent, and we lease it for a year. We set the contract up for a year or 2 years, depending on the person. I'd love to be able to do Section 8, but I realize Section 8 is going through some transitions itself right now. And I don't think this is the right time to jump into Section 8 as it stands right now. It's just too much happening, and I've got enough to try and figure out and learn than to go into that and to learn that as well. Now, it's also simpler. Like I said, easier to manage. It's going to be a more stable model because now I can really lay into those residents for that time. I can really lean into the things that I'm providing them. I can find a way to add a laundromat now as well on the land, on the property, and it won't fall apart at the drop of a dime because now I know, okay, if I'm getting laundry, I can increase income. If I have these, if I'm required to, hey, you got to rent the particular housing, that little housing area. You have a We'll have a meeting area, we'll have a gym area, we'll have a leisure area. If you want to hold an event, pay a couple $100, boom, you can have, and that's a barn dominium, so it's going to be relatively large. That covers that. That also goes towards cutting down the cost, so bringing us closer to the black as opposed to us living in the red. So the dream didn't change, just the strat behind it has to be adjusted. Now what happens next? Next thing I've got to do is I've got to find the land. I have an idea of the land, but I really have to lean deeper into this next pro forma with that land. I'm going to have to get some solid numbers there. I'm going to have to look a little bit harder at the utilities. I'm going to have to look at the distance between the properties themselves, and then how long these properties will last. So there's different models that I'm looking at right now. Capsule homes, to a traditional tiny home, and modular homes and container homes. Each with their pros and cons, I'm sure we'll talk about later, but each with their pros and cons. Here's the biggest lesson that I take away that I can give you. It's very simple. Trust the numbers. If you do a pro forma, or if you have an idea and you want to create this pro forma, put it together, sit down and really be honest about these numbers. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Can I add this here? Can I cut this there? Can I adjust here, here, and here? What can I do to improve these numbers? This way you have that solid plan going into what you do, knowing for a fact it's going to work. And additionally, it's better to pivot than to fail in real life. Not that pro forma not working kind of hurt a little bit. Like I was a little bit heartbroken, right? Because I had this grandiose idea. I thought it was going to be amazing. I thought it was going to be perfect, and it's not. It's not at all. Another thing, man, I actually gave you 3 as opposed to the 1, but whatever. Another thing is planning is also part of the building process. As a matter of fact, planning is the biggest part of the building process, because the planning part is going to save you money, time, and effort. If you know it's not going to work, you're going to spend your time on making that work. If you know it can work, then you can spend time on something that has the ability to succeed. I'm documenting this tiny odyssey in real time. If you're building something big, you're not alone. I want you to be a part of this. You're welcome to join me in this progress, to learn these lessons. Just follow along.